This is supporting our mental health through the holiday season. And we are very thrilled to have North Range Behavioral Health with us today to do this. I'm Barbara Boyer, the Executive Director, and Bob Brocker is out of town, so he will not be with us. Michaela Sanchez, this is a little bit of information about her. We'd like to have this on the screen so when you watch the recording or someone else watches it, you know a little about Michaela. We are AgeWise Colorado, as you no doubt know. We want to work with all of you to help connect everyone who needs help in the aging process to find trustworthy assistance service providers. And with that, Michaela, it is a pleasure to have you with us. And I will back off and the floor is all yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, thank you for having me. My name, like Barbara said, is Michaela Sanchez. I'm with North Range Behavioral Health, and I'm the Director of Marketing and Community Outreach with North Range. And we also have suicide education and support services, which is suicide prevention work in our department. Today, we wanted to talk about mental well-being during the holidays. When I talk with people about mental health, I find that it's helpful to level set and normalize a little bit that the human experience is full of ups and downs. And how we feel on any given day can really ebb and flow. So, this here is something that we live by. We all have good days and bad days, and it's okay to talk about our mental health. And when we remember this, it helps us understand that no one does this perfectly all the time. And it helps tremendously when we extend grace and when we receive grace and when we give grace to ourselves when things get hard. So I just want to kind of start the conversation with that. So embracing the holiday season isn't easy for everyone, right? The holidays can be cheery and charming, but they can also be tough. And so, sometimes we struggle to keep up with like the festive demands of this time of year, but it's also not uncommon for people to feel a wide range of emotions throughout the entire season, from stressed to sad to lonely or lost, or feeling disconnected or even drained. All of these feelings are valid and okay to experience. Holiday related stress and strained mental health is actually much more common than we realize. And I think that cognitively we know that, but when we're in the moment and we're feeling the emotions or we're feeling that stress or disconnection or overwhelm, it's a very isolating experience. And so in those times, we may think that we're the only ones that are feeling that. So I just wanted to remind everybody that it is normal to feel a wide variety of emotions and feelings throughout the holidays. So what can make these times tough during the holidays? Um, if you're comfortable with throwing some ideas in the chat, I'd love to see what ideas come from you about, we know that this is a festive time, but what can make it difficult? And Barbara, if anybody throws anything in the chat, if you can just let me know, because I'm having a hard time seeing that. There we go. Not enough time to do everything. Financial concerns is definitely something on everybody's mind right now. I'm going to go ahead and click on the slide here and see what else we have. Grief and loss comes up. Dealing with relatives, I see that, Barbara, thank you. The loneliness and the social isolation that might come with grief and loss, or maybe we, are living away from family. Finances, so those financial concerns. Family dynamics can kind of make things a little tricky. Dealing with our relatives. Does anybody, is anyone familiar with seasonal affective disorder? Have you heard of that? Sometimes it's called SAD. Other times it can be called, seasonal depression. And then stress. You know, and I really think that stress could be easily listed here as an umbrella term for all of these situations, these examples here, because every one of these things brings stress of some sort into our life, and that can make it challenging to manage during the holidays. And so I want to talk a little bit about the effect that stress has on us and then what we can do about it. So first of all, stress during the holidays can be tricky to understand. We have a variety of different emotions that can come up. And whenever we're feeling, the first thing that is most helpful to realize is that it doesn't have to be either or. It's not black and white. It's not one or the other. Numerous emotions and experience can be present and true. That's the key, right? Present and true at the same time. And so you don't have to force yourself to be happy if you're going through something. What you can do is you can aim to practice compassion with yourself and commit to practices that prioritize your well-being. So examples here that can make the holidays a little bit tricky. You can feel stress and still be excited for the holidays, right? Or you can love your family and still not be excited to spend time with them. You can want to give presents while also worrying about your bank account. You can find joy in memories of the holidays past and feel pain or sorrow at the same time. Those can both be true. And you can find ways to establish new traditions while honoring past ones. So stress affects our brain's ability to function effectively in daily life. We have a lower brain, which is responsible for our basic body functions and simple survival instincts. Some of us call this the lizard brain. So I'm holding my hand up to kind of demonstrate that's the lizard brain. And then we also have an upper brain, and that's the cortex, which is responsible for complex thought, reason, emotional regulation, decision-making, impulse control, and sometimes we call that the wizard brain. So we have the lizard brain, which is our lower brain connected to the brain stem, and then we have our wizard brain that develops with age and over time and is responsible for some of that emotional regulation. The lizard brain and the wizard brain work together. But when stress activates in our lizard brain, it can actually overpower the wizard brain and kind of bring it to a standstill. So what happens is when we experience a stressor, the information enters the brain stem in the lizard brain, and it actually matches to a memory. And in that moment, the amygdala, which lives in our lizard brain, releases or kind of evaluates the situation and determines whether or not it's a threat. If it's a threat, the amygdala releases cortisol, okay? And that cortisol blasts through the brain to the cortex, our wizard brain. And that cortisol is tasked with shutting down the stress response. But if for some reason that cortex can't turn the stress off, that amygdala inside of this lizard brain takes over and actually pulls blood flow away from our wizard brain and shuts it down. So now our lizard brain is in full control and our stress response kind of kicks in. It does cloud our judgment. And that's where you get that fight, flight, or freeze response that we've heard about in the past. So when we're experiencing those stressors as fight, flight, or freeze in our lizard brain, some of those examples may look like aggression, defensiveness, Substance use, this is where we're coping with the stress by misusing substances. Running or escaping, right? There's your flight response. Engaging in risky behavior can actually be a response to stress. Isolation and shutting down. And so it's important for us to think about how stress affects the brain, because when we're in this holiday season and we're experiencing stressors, our brain doesn't know whether that stress is a physical threat or whether it's perceived as a physical threat, even though we are safe. And so when we're talking about the holiday stress, our bodies are reacting in ways that are sometimes unconscious. So when we are hoping to cope with negative holiday emotions, I know that it sounds a little cliche, but honestly, journaling is one of the things that is very helpful, because you can use this journal to help create some stronger self-awareness about where you are in this moment and get some blood flow going back to your wizard brain. So using a journal during this time and kind of following through with some work to evaluate those negative holiday emotions can be helpful. Identifying what you are experiencing, pausing to breathe and calm yourself, naming the core emotion that you're feeling in that moment. Brene Brown has a wonderful book called The Atlas of the Heart, and she has actually done research to map out the variety of emotions that we experience in the human condition. It really does help you go through and understand what the core emotion is to what you may be experiencing. Listen to yourself without judgment on what your emotions are telling you, and think through how to move forward. And the reason why this is important and helpful is because, again, we're trying to stimulate the wizard brain, right? The lizard brain is in full control. And so when we go through these steps, we are pulling on that cognitive strength that we have. We're pulling on the emotional regulation and the ability to control our impulses. And so tapping into that is really going to help us wake that wizard brain back up. I want to dig a little bit deeper with a couple other strategies that can help us through the holiday. This one is one of the most important ones, and sometimes one of the most difficult ones to work through and remember when it's the holidays. Managing our expectations throughout the holiday season is one of the most helpful things that we can do to support our mental wellness. And understanding the things that we can and cannot control is really key to helping us manage our negative holiday emotions. So when you look at this circle of control, many of us spend most of our time in the purple area, even though the white area is where we have the most potential for optimal well-being. And the purple area are the things outside of my control. A couple of these examples, I'll just read out the things that are outside of my control. Whether or not somebody apologizes, what a family member or a loved one chooses to value, how much effort they put into a relationship, what life choices they make. Those are all of the things that are outside of our control. And we tend to try to shift the trajectory on that, right? We try to make some sort of influence into what that person's choices may be. What would you add, or what examples would you put in the circle that's outside of our control? If there's anything that comes to mind, or if there's anything here that really resonates with you, I'd love to see you share that in the chat if that's something you're comfortable doing. For me, the one about whether or not they support me can be tough during the holidays as a mom and a wife and a working woman. Um, I feel a lot of pressure sometimes to be the person who is the doer. And I think, sometimes on social media, they talk about the magic of the holiday, and then later on, children have turned into adults and they realize, oh, my mother or my father, or whoever that person was in their life, they were the magic of the holidays. And so whether or not somebody supports me in helping to create the magic of the holidays can be something that can create stress in me. And what I have learned is that setting boundaries for myself, and communicating my needs and my wants with people is actually going to get me closer to happiness than focusing on the fact that they may or may not be doing what I want them to do. So when we talk about boundaries, that is another thing that is really important in supporting our mental health, not just during the holidays, but all year long. This is a part that of this conversation I think is really important because when we talk about boundaries, we know that establishing healthy boundaries during the holidays helps us take care of our mental health, but we often think of boundaries as us telling someone else what they can and cannot do. And instead, boundaries are actually about you telling yourself what your limitations are and then communicating that with others. So, for instance, in the holiday context, let's say, sometimes spending time during the holidays with family members can cause stress. So maybe a family member is struggling with substance use and it creates stress when you're around that behavior. Instead of trying to control the family member's choice or behavior, you can communicate a boundary by saying, we're happy to attend the family dinner. Just so you know, if Aunt Susie starts drinking too much, we will leave. And so with this response, you're not saying that Aunt Susie can't drink. That is in the purple. Remember, that's outside of your control. That's her choice. But what is within your control is when you choose to leave or if you choose to be around it, right? And so you can make that boundary with yourself and then communicate it to somebody up front. And when you communicate it up front, you're actually choosing to leave with love, right? You're leading that conversation with love. You're sharing your boundaries up front and letting people know, I really want to spend time, and then here's as far as I can go if the situation turns into something that I'm uncomfortable with. Maybe you're entrenched like in the struggles with your family member who's struggling with substance use and it's taking a toll on your own mental health. That can be something that we can get caught up in a lot of that back and forth, right, with somebody that we love. So you might communicate a boundary by saying, I'm here for you. I just can't be there for you in a way that's healthy for both of us. So when you're ready for help, I've got you. I'm in your corner. One thing that's helpful with setting boundaries is using when statements. They create a balance between establishing a healthy boundary and leaving the door open for future relationship growth when they are ready to try a different path. This doesn't equate in control, right? Because you can't control what they're going to do and their choices are their own. But you can say, I can go this far in the relationship with you in this situation. If the situation changes, I am willing and ready to be right there in your corner. So that helps us keep a connection intact while at the same time taking care of ourselves. one thing that I'll kind of go back to Brene Brown again. I remember listening to a podcast with her, and she mentioned something about a key that you can find in yourself when you have not honored a boundary that needs to be set for you is when you start to feel resentment. If you are feeling resentment, you may be thinking that it's about what the other person is doing, but it's actually resentment for the fact that you are not honoring what you know you need to say or do. And so looking at it from that perspective, it takes it back into that circle of influence, that white part that is really within our control. So another thing that we can do to support our wellness in the holidays is to stay connected. And I think the first thing that is important to outline here is that there is a difference between alone time and self-isolation. Someone can be alone and feel completely connected to themselves and to the world around them because that is a choice they're making and they're feeling fulfilled in that time. Self-isolation becomes a almost like a protection that we're having when we're in our lizard brain. Remember that part of the stress response? So if I'm feeling that there is a threat somewhere, I may self-isolate, and that may create some maladaptive habits. I'm wondering, what things do you do to help you stay connected or invest in relationships during this holiday season? It's always important for us to think of the things that go right and go well, and what we do well to take care of ourselves. Some examples of staying connected are things like this webinar today, right? More family outreach. You know, I like that you said that. For me, it is a really busy time of year. And so I try to stay connected with friends during the holiday by sending songs or quotes that make me smile, and I send those to my loved ones. Calendar reminders to check in with friends when they have big events coming up. That is really thoughtful. You know, sometimes we have these big things happening and our loved ones may not be thinking of that. And it really does mean a lot when someone just checks in and says, "Hey, I hope today goes great for you." What other things do we do to stay connected during the holidays? Looking for volunteer opportunities. You know, we've talked about that before, offering help. In my community, we have a Habitat for Humanity fundraiser that's coming up. And I saw it pop up on my screen. And then I texted my girlfriends because we're all really busy. And I said, you know, for those who would be interested, there is a cookie walk that's happening. What if we all got together, picked a very simple recipe, cooked one type of cookie, and then donated that to the cookie walk? And those who had time to say yes are going to be attending, and those who didn't have time and couldn't attend, that's okay too. But just throwing those options out there and also making it very low stress. We're not going to make 17 different cookies. We're not going to do, you know, the 2-day recipe. We're looking for things that are quick and easy and really helps us create some time together that's quality. And then we're also doing something to help people. So remember when we talked about the effects of stress on the brain, the lizard brain and the wizard brain, right? I keep coming back to that. Whether it's the holiday or typical daily life stress, these things are ways that we can clue into our body to actually finish the stress cycle. Because what happens is if we go through that cycle of stress, we have to complete it. If we don't complete it, we're staying in our lizard brain, right? You're almost kind of stuck there. And so when I talked about the journaling piece and kind of going through some of those observations that you make through the process, that's helping to finish the stress cycle. Exercise and movement is a huge help in finishing the stress cycle. You've got all of those, you know, kind of hormones and different things that are happening in your body when you're exercising. Breathing is really good. I know we've all grown up with hearing, you know, we'll count to 10. And there's actually a lot of wisdom to that. You have a vagus nerve, VAGUS, in your brainstem or your spine there. And that nerve, when you stimulate it, it helps you to bring down the stress and get out of that lizard brain. Breathing, deep breathing is what helps to stimulate the vagus nerve. There's a lot of exercises, breathing exercises that you can look up online to help you find one that would work easy for you. Positive social interactions, right? So staying connected and focusing on nurturing relationships, and those can be with yourself and with others. Giving and receiving affection. We are wired for connection. And affection can be, you know, a hug, it can be a smile, it can be a, you know, pat on a shoulder, but being able to be in community with people and giving and receiving affection is really good for our mental health and for finishing the stress cycle. Creative expression is another one that is really helpful, and one that I personally know that I would like to tap in more to in the coming year. And then crying. There is a very wonderful catharsis that happens when we cry. It does release those emotions, and it kind of creates a physical closure to that stress response. When it comes to exercise and movement, the other thing that's really helpful during the holiday seasons is getting outside and being around sunlight. We have and I can send this to you, Barbara, but there is a challenge that's just starting this week. It's called Move Through the Darkness. And Move Through the Darkness is a no-cost challenge to move during the winter months, because we know that during the winter months, there are a lot of stressors. We do tend to spend a little bit more time inside. We may get a little less active, and our sunlight exposure is naturally impacted. And so this challenge allows you to either sign up and commit to a certain amount of hours for the season that you're going to get out or get in movement. You can do it on your own. You can join teams that already exist, or you can create your own team. Again, it's a no-cost challenge, but if you do choose to donate, all proceeds go to, it's called Windsor Gives, and then they donate after kind of the administrative cost, they donate the proceeds to Imagine Zero of Weld County, which is a suicide prevention coalition in the Weld County community. So Barbara, I can send that to you after the webinar.
That would be good. Thank you. I'll add that.
Time and again, regardless of whether it's the holiday season or any time of the year, self-care is a really key solution to taking care of our mental health. And we don't want to overlook the basics that make a big difference for our body. Sometimes we think of self-care as bubble baths and spas and trips, but it's really about making sure that you get enough sleep, moving your body, eating nutrient-dense foods, remembering to breathe, finding time for what's going on in the present moment. Some people call that mindfulness. Getting enough sunlight, you know, we were just talking about that. Step outside or open the blinds. I know that when when winter time happens and we're doing some cleaning, my husband will open all of the windows. It doesn't matter how cold it is outside and we're all freezing. He's like, nope, we need to get some fresh air circulating in here. I'm sure, you know, many of you do that too. And it really does change the environment and change how we feel. But sunlight really does play a huge role in improving our mood and relieving stress. And so thinking of all of the things that we've kind of discussed here, and you know, I would love to go back and kind of sit a little bit longer in some of the slides that we have, if anybody is interested in talking through them a little bit more. But I created a holiday self-care checklist. And so, you know, we have our checklist of all the things that we need to do, what we need to do in the house, or the presents we need to buy, or the grocery lists. But not often do we think of a self-care checklist like this. And so it really is a promise to ourselves. I'm going to go ahead and read them for everyone. I will focus on things that are within my control. I will set and honor healthy boundaries. I will invest in relationships. I will take care of my physical health with exercise, sleep, sunlight, or treat illness as needed. I will find ways to help finish the stress cycle. I will avoid mood-altering substances. I will commit to doing something every day that makes me feel confident, or keeps me learning. What would you add to this self-care checklist? What promise would you make to yourself through the holidays to help you boost your mental wellness? Try to find humor when I might not want to. Yeah. Embrace flexibility. I've found a lot of peace in that when it comes to planning things with family members, right? Going back to that circle of control. So whatever the stressor, the holidays can feel a lot for many, and sometimes it's hard to slow down or enjoy much of anything, right? We feel like we're just constantly going. So it is okay to reach out for help. And if you're feeling overwhelmed or you just want to stay ahead of seasonal stress, there are resources available to help. As I mentioned, North Range Behavioral Health, we provide support in Weld County. So there's some information there about how to connect with us. But, you know, if you're in other parts of Colorado, the Colorado Crisis Services line is there. And when we talk about the word crisis, it really is something that's defined by the person experiencing the stressor, right? So I remember there was a time when I talked with a crisis counselor and they said that someone had called because they burned their quiche. And eventually you find out that it's not about the quiche, right? But the person who had called in couldn't understand why the quiche burning had taken them to a place where they were angry and sad, overwhelmed, and couldn't get past that. And so it's those types of situations when it's helpful to talk to somebody to help get you to a place where you kind of go back out of that fight, flight, or freeze situation, that response, to come up with, okay, so let's think about what the next right step can be to help us get to a place where we're feeling that we can, you know, move on from the quiche. And then nationally, there's the 988 Lifeline, which is a wonderful resource that's just kind of come to be, the equivalent of 911. And again, all circumstances are welcome if you need someone to talk to. it's a great option. I also, like kind of suggest to people that you can practice calling or texting. That's always okay. Sometimes it can be a little bit, overwhelming to think about having to make a call or a text. But honestly, we've done it time and time again. You can call or text any of these lines here and just let them know, I'm just trying it out to see what the process is or how it works, and they're gonna say, okay. And then that first time is gone, and now you have it saved in your phone. And if you're ever around a family member or you are experiencing a need for having some connection with someone to help, then it's not so scary. And that is what I have for kind of going through supporting our mental health during the holidays. I don't know if it's okay to open it up for questions, Barbara.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I would just remind everyone, unless you've written down those numbers, all of those organizations, the text lines, the phone numbers, the emails are also on the AgeWise website. So you can have quick access to them.
Yes.
So indeed, let's open this up to questions. Does anyone have questions or even comments about what we've talked about here?
And if someone wants to go back and look at a slide again, I'm happy to pull it up. So let us know about that too.
We may be getting a gift of time to just relax before we get back to the rest of our day, because I don't see any other questions in the chat.
Yeah, Savannah says that there's lots of helpful takeaways. Thank you. That's what we hope to do, is to really give some tangible things, common sense things, no cost, right? It really is about self-awareness and understanding what we can and cannot control. And then once we realize what we can control, figuring out some strategies for doing that. Are we journaling? Are we observing our emotions? Are we setting boundaries? Are we getting enough sleep? There is actually a lot that we can control when we focus on that white part of the circle. Boundary setting with someone with a mental health issue can be hard. I agree. There are, for a lot of reasons, right? And I think that if we go into that space of number one, giving grace to ourselves and each other when things get hard, no one does this perfectly all the time. And remembering that conflicting emotions can exist and be true. I can love a family member or a loved one with a mental health challenge or a diagnosis, and I can still be tapped out. I can still need to say no. One does not equate the other. And if you are looking for a way to set a boundary, going back to that when statement can be really helpful, because it keeps that door open. Sometimes when we are setting those boundaries, we think that it has to be a very hard line that we're setting, and we have to kind of almost be a little short and curt about it, because we're so intent on saying absolutely no, no flexibility in this. I'm setting a boundary. But what we also need to remember is that setting a boundary is not about what the other person is doing. It's about how far we are willing to engage. I remember I had a conversation with a loved one, and when I knew about this boundary setting kind of lens shifting, it was really helpful to have that conversation, because the conversation probably in the past would have gone, you are not going to talk to me like that. I refuse to let you say those things to me. You will not do this anymore. That turns into more of a argument, right? And a need for control, a power struggle. Once I learned about how to reframe boundaries, it turned into, I am willing to have a conversation with you. I want to have that conversation with you. And when you are able to talk to me in a different way, I am happy to have that conversation with you. For now, the way that the conversation is going, I have to end the conversation. When you are able to have that conversation in a different way, please call me back. That expresses love. It expresses that you are no longer moving forward. And it gives them the power of their own choice. You know, and that can be something that can work with anybody in our relationship. But I agree, you know, when we're have loved ones, when we're loving someone that may be going through a mental health challenge, it can sometimes be a one day at a time situation, and it can be a one moment at a time situation. And you are also able to ask for help as well and support, because that is something that you don't have to carry alone.
Do we have any other questions, comments? I think this has been extraordinarily helpful. I hope that others will take the opportunity. It'll probably take us a week or so to get this posted. And actually, I believe that a lot of the information you've shared with us, Michaela, can help us all year round.
Yes, yes, it can.
So I thank you so very much. As I say, we'll get this posted as soon as we can. We do a little bit of editing to get rid of any glitches. And I hope maybe we see some of you next week, where Acts of Connection will be talking with us about social isolation, a very critical subject, especially for those who are older adults. So thank you, everyone. Have a great holiday season if we don't see you again soon. And thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.